A day after a suicide attack kills and injures dozens of civilians in Mogadishu, al-Zawahiri welcomes the Somali group Al-Shabab as a branch of Al-Qaeda. What does that mean for the conflict in Somalia? How can African forces and the governments deal with the new tactics of Al-Shabab, attacking soft targets in the capital? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the program. I'm Adrian Finnegan. The leader of Al-Qaeda, Ayman al-Zawahiri, has said that Somali militant group Al-Shabab has formally joined Al-Qaeda. Al-Shabab has been in conflict with African Union forces since 2006, and in August last year, the group lost control of Mogadishu. But despite their withdrawal, Al-Shabab have carried out a series of deadly attacks in the capital. The most recent of these saw 15 people killed on Wednesday in a bomb blast outside a popular cafe. The attacks show the group now resorting to tactics closer to that of a terrorist organisation. Yet leadership and strategy remains unclear within this notoriously unpredictable group. Mohammed Shakir reports.
Today, I have glad tidings for the Muslim nation that will please the believers and disturb the crusaders, which is the joining of the Shabab Mujahideen movement in Somalia to the Al-Qaeda jihad group.
Ayman al-Zawahiri's statement that Al-Shabab has formally joined Al-Qaeda was preceded by a bloody attack in Mogadishu. At least 15 people were killed and dozens more injured by a suicide bomber from the Al-Qaeda-linked Al-Shabab near a hotel only a few hundred meters away from the presidential palace in the Somali war-torn capital Mogadishu. The attack raised doubts about the capabilities of the government and the African forces to secure areas they have recently brought under their control. It also sends a message that nothing has really changed on the ground. The deputy commander of the African Union forces in Mogadishu, General Odis Adomisi, admitted in a press conference that the situation is serious and that what he described as the new tactics by Al-Shabab require a lot more work and cooperation on the ground by everyone, including the local people, who are a vital source of information and early warning.
TFG forces and the TFG police with AMISOM police and AMISOM forces, they can do a reaction. We need information from people, from journalists.
As expected, the government condemned the attack, calling it a massacre against the Somali people, confirming that it has arrested 3 suspects and pledging to defeat Al-Shabab.
Such attacks happen everywhere, even in developed countries. It's hard to stop someone who's attempting to blow himself up, hoping to kill innocent civilians. These people are mentally sick.
Meanwhile, the Somali street lives in horror. After the exchanged threats by both sides, people are bracing themselves for a new round of more bloodshed that no one can predict how far it will reach. Mohammed Shakir for Inside Story.
Well, Al-Shabab, which means the youth in Arabic, is an armed group that grew out of other Islamist militias that have been battling Somalia's transitional government since 2006. It currently controls much of southern Somalia with an estimated 9,000 fighters. The group wants to impose a strict version of Sharia law in the country. It's already considered a terrorist movement by the United States. Well, Al-Shabab leaders have claimed affiliation with Al-Qaeda since 2007. In 2009, the group released a video called "At Your Service, Osama," pledging allegiance to Al-Qaeda. That was praised by the former Al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden, who released a video of his own in which he made encouraging comments about the group. In February 2010, the group admitted for the first time having links to Al-Qaeda. In July that year, Al-Shabab had shown its ability to strike beyond Somalia, killing dozens of Ugandans inside the capital Kampala. Ugandan troops provide the bulk of a 9,000-strong African Union peacekeeping force in Somalia. In 2011, the Pentagon approved $45 million in arms shipments to African troops fighting against Al-Shabab in Somalia. In October last year, Kenyan troops crossed into southern Somalia to hit back for a rash of kidnappings that it blamed on the group. 1 month later, leaders of Kenya, Uganda and the Somali government itself vowed to defeat Al-Shabab. So, what threat does Al-Shabaab's formal alliance with Al-Qaeda pose, and what are the ongoing challenges for the region? To answer these questions, we're joined by our guests today. Joining us in Mogadishu, we have Lieutenant Colonel Paddy Ankunda, spokesman for the African Union Peacekeeping Mission in Somalia, AMISOM. In Singapore, Rohan Gunaratne, head of the International Centre for Political Violence and Terrorism Research and author of Inside Al-Qaeda. And here in Doha, we're joined by Fiari Elmi, Somalia analyst and lecturer in international politics at Qatar University. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. Rohan Gunaratne, if we can start with you in Singapore. What are we to make of this announcement today by the Al-Qaeda leader? Al-Shabaab's always been loosely affiliated with Al-Qaeda. Why this announcement and why now?
It is a very significant announcement because Mukhtar Abu al-Saidi, who is the leader of Al-Shabab al-Mujahideen, has formally forged a relationship with Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri, the leader of Al-Qaeda. And now Al-Qaeda has announced that the Al-Shabaab is a part of the Al-Qaeda structure. So this in many ways is very significant because in the past, Al-Qaeda operatives have worked together with Al-Shabaab. For example, we had the Al-Qaeda leader in East Africa, Fazul Harun from Comoros, who was killed in Somalia recently. But this alliance is much more than Al-Qaeda just simply working together with Al-Shabaab. This means that the supporters, sympathizers, will continue to provide assistance not only to Al-Qaeda but also to Al-Shabaab because of this merger, because of this formal alliance. As a result, it's very important for the international security organizations to look at Al-Shabaab more closely.
Fiari Elmi here in Doha. To what extent is Al-Shabaab not one but two groupings? One, a collection of hardline radicals, the other nationalist, clan-based militia. And given that some nationalists recently announced their intention to rename Al-Shabaab the Islamic Emirate of Somalia, is this announcement perhaps indicative of a split? How will the nationalists within Al-Shabaab be feeling about it?
Well, let me first answer the first question that you have asked, which is why now? I guess there are a number of reasons from the Al-Shabaab point of view, simply because Al-Shabaab lost most of the domestic revenue sources that they used to rely on. And now there were military and political pressures coming from different sides. And as a result, they might need some support or perhaps seek some support. But what I think we have to keep in mind here is that Al-Shabaab has already pledged allegiance to Al-Qaeda years ago. Americans have added them to the terror list. So from the counterinsurgency perspective, it will not change much. Basically, what we have is symbolic changes, but substantively, everybody knew that they had relationships. They were public about it. And also the Americans and others in the region who were fighting against knew about it, both in Mogadishu and outside of it. So technically, I mean, whatever was going in terms of operations against Al-Shabaab will keep on going, and it might not change that much. So that is one thing. The second part is that Al-Shabaab has always been heterogeneous movement. And there were people within Al-Shabaab who are largely perceived as nationalists, who have grievances of their own, and also who may have aspirations that they want to have political, interests within the Somali borders. And perhaps it's now going to fast forward the differences within them and bring it to the floor. And maybe we might see within the next perhaps coming weeks and days some division within Al-Shabaab, some resisting and others still calling for this. And perhaps one more reason could be that now we're hearing many voices that are saying that negotiation must be a way. We have to talk to whoever is willing to talk about peace. Maybe this is one I mean, a move where radicals within Al-Shabaab want to preempt I mean, the voices of reason and the voices that wanted to end the conflict as soon as possible. So maybe that's, but one thing is clear, that we might see some rift within, which will come to the floor soon.
Lieutenant Colonel Padiang Kunda, give us your assessment of where we're at in the military fight against Al-Shabaab. Has AMISOM, the African Union force, got them on the back foot?
Well, I think I could give three reasons. And first of all, to comment on the significance of the Al-Shabaab having now formally declared that they have joined Al-Qaeda. One is that they lost major sources of revenue in the name of Bakara market, from which they were getting well over $20 million a year. Secondly, it's of course the fact that we have a group of nationalists who are within the Al-Shabaab, and these might now be thinking about abandoning Al-Qaeda and seeking to engage the African Union and other stakeholders in peace talks. And of course, on our part, we welcome them. But thirdly, of course, the whole idea that now it's formal. So the international community must now tackle Al-Qaeda in Somalia. It's no longer a simple regional problem. It's a problem for the world. AMISOM and African Union are doing their best to get them out, and this is the time to support us. But on the whole, we have pushed them out of Mogadishu. They're now roaming about in the countryside. In the coming days, we will be seeking to expand AMISOM beyond Mogadishu. We hope that the United Nations Security Council soon will approve increased troops and the provision of force enablers, including helicopters, and increased marine capability plus engineer capabilities, because this will enable us to extend our control outside Mogadishu and enable the transitional federal government to reassert its authority outside the city.
Rohan Gunaratne, as far as Al-Qaeda is concerned, to what extent is this a public relations gambit? Is Al-Qaeda's core suffering and trying to remain relevant, as one US official put it, operationally impotent? It needs all the PR it can get.
Al-Qaeda has suffered massively. Osama bin Laden was killed on May 2nd. After that, the deputy of Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri, a Libyan, was also killed. So Al-Qaeda itself has diminished in its strength, and it is trying to make a comeback by building alliances and relationships with other groups. And certainly the pronouncement of Ayman al-Zawahiri should be considered in that light, because Al-Qaeda by itself is no longer operationally capable. It has transformed from an operational organization to an ideological and a propaganda organization.
Afiari Elmi, you talked about the potential for a split within Al-Shabaab. How do you keep the more radical elements of it from scattering across East Africa under the Al-Qaeda banner? Was this announcement the green light to do so, the okay to become a regional terrorist threat?
Well, I think overall, when we look back and in retrospect, we will see that the strategy that has been used in order to stabilize Somalia was ineffective, to say the least, simply because most of the time the international community and the TFG relied on foreign forces, and also they have not really engaged whoever that is supposed to be engaged within the Shabab. For instance, when Hizbul Islam was there, I think it was reachable, at least, or some of them could have been reached at the time. Anyway, what we see right now is that this over-reliance of foreign forces, whether they be AMISOM or whether they be neighboring countries, is not going to help. What is needed at this stage, and by the way, in everywhere that extremism has been defeated, it was a national force, a national professional force that has defeated them. And in Somalia, that's what's lacking, and that's what has been either ignored or overlooked deliberately. And I think that is what needs to be done. The first is to establish Somali national force that's inclusive, that can do the job. And I think with that also, the sanctions against Somalia must be removed as well, because at the end of the day, it's not just the urban Mogadishu and Kismayo. The fight will move to the rural areas, and I don't think the AMISOM or other countries would go there. You need a real national force that can stabilize the country. That is where progress actually is almost minimal, if not non-existent. And I think that is what we need to focus at this stage. The second aspect is the reconciliation that a friend of mine and I have just written an article on foreign affairs in which we argue that negotiation must be used as a counter sort of insurgency strategy and must be, use it on a regular basis and well informed in the sense that, what we see now is just the rhetoric, like very high on basically rhetoric, no substance whatsoever from the government and from the international community. And what needs to be done is actively engage those who want to chump and to deal with the rest of the country and also build the institutions. I think these are the two things that are lacking at this stage.
Paddy Ankunda, Lieutenant Colonel, AMISOM forces are involved in training Somali forces right now. What do your bosses see as the time scale for this AMISOM mission in Somalia? And how do they answer the criticism that without a coherent long-term political strategy in Somalia, any military gains against Al-Shabaab will be short-lived?
Well, I think, first of all, this is the opportune moment for the world to jump onto this success and change Somalia for good. The West has been looking for a partner, and I think this time around we have a partner. The West has a partner in Uganda, in Burundi, and now Kenya. What we need is some resources to make sure that we take advantage of this success. In our view, we think it's important to develop the transitional federal institutions, including the military, which Elmi was talking about, but also that in the long term, we will seek to ensure that the areas that have been liberated can be policed properly. And so the police will be very, very key in this effort. And therefore, if the world can understand that this is a global problem and this is a global war, that some regional forces have come out openly to counter and provide those resources that are key. In our view, this problem can be solved.
Rohan Gunaratna, given that Al-Shabaab is involved in active combat with Western allies, Kenya and Ethiopia and AMISOM, does Al-Qaeda gain in terms of credibility by bringing Al-Shabaab into the fold, so to speak?
The merger itself is achievement for Al-Qaeda, because Al-Qaeda has a number of allies. Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, Al-Qaeda in Iraq, but certainly they don't have links with an organization that has a number of such a large force such as Al-Shabaab. Al-Shabaab may be 10,000 fighters. And I personally believe that it is a very significant achievement for Al-Qaeda, and that is why it is so important for the international community to put in more resources to dismantle the Al-Shabaab infrastructure and to empower a mainstream government returning to Somalia. It is a significant threat that should be considered very seriously by everyone.
Well, let's put that to Afyari Elmi. I want to pick up on what you were saying earlier. To what extent has US policy on Somalia, largely revolving as it does around counter-terrorism, exacerbated Somalia's plight? Should the US be looking to, as you were saying, to reconstitute Somalia's government, or at least to help it reconstitute the government, and with humanitarian aid, but through its Muslim allies, perhaps Turkey, for instance, which is one of the very few countries to have an embassy in Mogadishu, or Qatar?
Well, actually, I am on record saying this before a number of times, that when you just focus on the symptoms of the problem, whether that is terrorism or or piracy or issues such as that, these are symptoms, not the root cause of the problem. The root cause of the problem was the statelessness, and nobody has focused on, nobody has worked on rebuilding a Somali state that is legitimate, that is owned by the Somalis. So Somalia became basically free for all. Neighboring countries come in and do whatever they want to do, and then here you have the superpower that is just chasing a number of international terrorists and all of these things. And in reality, we ended up all of these ended up perpetuating the statelessness in the country. And I think the sooner we understand it, the better. Now we see the London conference, which is trying to reverse this, and now David Cameron is hosting many national and international leaders to just have some form of consensus on Somalia. I think that's a good step towards the right direction. But what needs to be done is a real, and genuine steps in building Somali state. And that starts with building the Somali professional army. Nothing, I would say nothing that is worth the name has been done so far. Now Mogadishu is basically under the control of AMISOM, and there are some regions that are under the control of Kenyans and Ethiopians. And that's not going to help in the end. Basically, we'll just keep on the status quo.
Okay, we're short of time here. Paddy Ankunda, with all this talk you're hearing about dialogue, Uganda's been pushing for a troop surge in Somalia. How would that help the situation?
Well, first of all, the phases that we are moving into, trying to establish a footprint in the countryside, requires more troops. And that's why we are saying that the approval of the United Nations by the Security Council of the deployment of Kenya in the south will come in handy. In fact, we welcome that. First of all, we shall stretch the Al-Shabab, that's one. But secondly, we will be able to open up other fronts in the countryside. So a troop surge is very, very key. But that's not enough. We need more resources. We have said this before, that we need force enablers, and if these can be provided, we will be good to go.
Fiari Elmi, then, given what we've just heard there, if there are more troops that are required, would a degraded Al-Shabaab be open to political dialogue? How do you draw them into the political process if that is the way forward?
Well, the state building in terms of military, in terms of security force, must continue regardless of how the negotiations go. So that, but that is not going well. That's what I disagree with the colonel when it comes to what's happening in Somalia. I would like the international community to focus on building Somali forces, not just, AMISOM forces are there only for a short period of time. We have to count on the long-term strategy of the country, and that is not what's happening. But on the negotiation front, I think this is a very good time, because the nationalist forces within Al-Shabaab must come out now and say, no, we're not going to join Al-Qaeda.
All right, very quickly, Rohan Gunaratna, I'm just wondering whether you think this announcement that Al-Shabaab is being brought formally into the Al-Qaeda fold will mean that Al-Shabaab would be expected to carry out perhaps a signature Al-Qaeda-style attack in the very near future.
Al-Shabaab has already conducted suicide attacks. Al-Shabaab has already issued statements that reflect that the ideology of Al-Shabaab is not only to recover Somalia, but also to mount operations against Western forces, even outside the Somali region. And that is why the merger itself clearly denotes that there's a segment of Al-Shabaab leaders that are that are ideologically very close to Al-Qaeda. This means that the international community should focus more on Al-Shabaab members, their supporters, their sympathizers, and also links of Al-Shabaab to various other pockets of groups that are operating outside Somalia.
Gentlemen, we are out of time. Thank you very much indeed to our guests in Mogadishu, Colonel Paddy Ankunda, in Singapore, Rohan Gunaratna, and in Doha, Afiari Elmi. And thank you very much indeed for watching us on this edition of Inside Story. If you want to send us your feedback, please do so. Email us your thoughts at insidestory@aljazeera.net. See you again. Bye for now.